Hey, another big month from Microsoft for the July update. Some really interesting stuff around the Excel finance functions, the Azure Maps visuals, and external tool launch. Okay, so getting straight into it, the reporting gradient legend. So basically this comes into play when you've set up like conditional formatting for a bar or column chart. So when you basically turn on the legend, as they're doing right now, you can see that the gradient legend comes into play. Fantastic. Obviously formatting, you can shift that legend around a little bit, so that's really good. Okay, slicer header text. So basically what we just have here is some customization on slicers where you can now put in basically like a short title for the text rather than it being defined by the fields or the column names that are in the slicer. Moving on to the Q&A enhancements. So in the analytics space, what we've got here is basically they're showing that you can either in the field synonyms set up for Q&A, you can either disable an entire table from the Q&A search, or you can disable individual particular columns, which they're kind of doing right now, or measure. So here they go, just sort of down to the revenue per transaction, and just disable that column from the search for Q&A. The other thing that they highlight is that basically Q&A will search terms as a priority over suggested terms. So if you really want those suggested terms to come into that search as a priority, then you can just add it through, and that's what they're doing right now. Pretty straightforward. So the other thing is that you may rename a field or a measure within the visual. So it's really important to be able to bring that back into the Q&A setup. And so as you can see, the concrete jungle, they have basically seen that come through and applied it to the terms. There is now an orange underline for the Q&A. So typically blue means there's a match, red means that they can't find anything. And in this case, when they're kind of saying last year, it'll go orange underline, dotted underline, because it doesn't know particularly what date to use when searching for last year. So it's kind of a little bit confused. The other thing is when you drill through for the Q&A, you basically get a better alignment of the pop-up box, so that's pretty straightforward. Azure Map visuals, really some really good interesting features there. So obviously with the map you can like pan, zoom, rotate and pitch it, and there are 7 map styles as they indicate. There are some layers that we'll go through in a minute, the bubble layer, bar chart layer, and there's some contextual layers that they mentioned there. So we've got this reference layer, tile layer and traffic layer. So they're all very straightforward to easy to use, and the key thing to kind of note that uses TomTom, which is a third-party provider of mapping, and so there is some data that you are sharing through with TomTom, and you just need to be aware of that. I'll put something in the links in the description which sort of highlight where you can find out more about those concerns. So basically here what we need to do is first set it up. So it's a preview feature, so we just need to select Azure Map Visual, and then you'll then have this new visual that you can bring into the canvas. And I showed that disclaimer basically around sharing of the data. So the bubbles layer, just so there's basically some options there, typical things that you would expect around min, max size and the scaling, whether it's log or linear, the transparency. So they're all fairly straightforward. That's the contrast that they're talking about. Yeah, it's not overly complex, but it's quite a good implementation. But it is limited to those 30,000 data points, which is quite a lot, but for some implementations it's not going to be enough. Moving on, we come to the bar chart layer. So really it's just, you can either have a cylinder or sort of like rectangular or box shape. So yeah, really interesting. Certainly helps tell the story a little bit, and it's certainly interesting and some eye candy to that as well. General layer, obviously, how is how we manage globally for this visual, zeros and negatives, and they're the typical things you would kind of expect to see as well. So this reference layer, they're kind of bringing in some geospatial data in a JSON file, kind of useful, and very interesting sort of way of adding an extra layer of meaning into the mapping. The tile layer is obviously they're like using URL to bring in some mapping weather information, and quite useful again. They're just sort of demonstrating that slicer functionality. So if we go back just quickly, the slicer functionality that they're kind of talking about is like typical as in Power BI, that if you click on one visual, it will cross highlight or cross filter on another visual. So there's just been some updates that come through from multi-axis, which is provided by xViz in the app source space. So it's a very interesting visual, just showing you very quickly what was in the this is pretty awesome. 49 Excel finance functions from basically brought across from Excel into the Power BI world. For finance people and people working in Excel, I think everybody's going to love this, and it's really for over the last month, that's a lot of work, a lot of functions to be bringing through in 1 month. So pretty cool. They're just showing here that they've built a future value function and visualizing it. Data preparation. So the automatic type detection, especially with unstructured sources like a CSV file, for example, sometimes you get some issues with the detection of types. Basically this lets you at a global level for Power BI Desktop turn that off, so that you have a little bit more control over the types that you define for columns. And sort of moving on from that, we have the YouTube Analytics. So this comes in the template app space, really by MAQ Software. It looks pretty cool, and for those people who are YouTubers, no doubt that'll be very valuable for them. External tool launch. So basically what Microsoft have brought in for Power BI now is that there are some common toolkits out there that people use that are third party built, and so they're now kind of brought into the Power BI Desktop just for ease of use, and so you can kind of launch these toolkits at a click within Power BI Desktop instead of having to sort of go to the start menu, for example, and go click it and open it there. So just quickly go through those. Basically we have the Tabular Editor, DAX Studio and ALM Toolkit. These are great third-party tools that help with the productivity basically, and the Tabular Editor is it's more of a dedicated tool that covers both Power BI Desktop and Analysis Services tabular models. It's fantastic in that you can kind of use that one tool to cover both sort of areas, and it just has additional sort of productivity features in there that sort of help obviously build your productivity levels. The other is DAX Studio, so it's really there to help you analyze the DAX that you've written, so to see how it performs, so you can help you figure out how to optimize that DAX. So very useful. ALM Toolkit, something that in the past has been kind of a bit remiss, and this tool helps quite a lot. It helps kind of merge code between two different databases, helps you understand the differences that exist between two different databases. So really it's around that lifecycle management. It helps with that deployment. Some really good stuff this month in July, and really thank Microsoft for putting that extraordinary effort. I know it's their tool and they've got a self-interest in doing that, but really appreciate the ongoing development in the tooling and improvements. Again, the highlights I think for me have really been those Excel finance functions. I mean, to pull out 49 new functions in the 1 month. The Azure Maps visual is really interesting, as is for me YouTube Analytics, and as a developer, the external tools, making it easier to get to those tools quickly while you're in there doing some development within Power BI desktop is fantastic. We can only hope next month there's some more great goodies, and if you enjoy this video and like what you're seeing, please hit the like button and subscribe, and really appreciate if you could leave some comments in the comment section below so it can help figure out how to improve these videos for you and try and keep them as short as possible. Thanks once again, and catch you next month.